Hello, hello. Welcome everyone to today's webinar on how to use new tools and technology for your capital campaign planning. I am so excited for today's webinar. I am joined by Amy, who is part of the Capital Campaign Pro. She is an advanced certified fundraising executive, and she's going to be sharing all about capital campaigns. So again, Amy Eisenstein, or Einstein, I'm sorry, I should have, Eisenstein, sorry, I guess I should have corrected that. Will be joining us today, and she'll be sharing more about capital campaign planning. Again, she's the CEO and co-founder of Capital Campaign Pro, and she has a lot to share with us. So before we get started, I just want to take some time for some quick housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded, and you will have a chance to receive all the slides and the resources in a follow-up email. If you have any questions throughout today's webinar, feel free to chat them in to either the Q&A panel or the chat box. And before we get started, I'd love to have you just chat us in your name, where you're from, maybe any initial questions you might have about campaign planning. And so I'm going to start with a brief introduction about CauseVox. But before I do, I just want to introduce today's speaker, Amy Eisenstein, the CEO and co-founder of the Capital Campaign Pro. She's one of the leading voices in the field of fundraising. Amy is an AFP certified master trainer, also the former president of the board of AFP New Jersey. And she's one of the few ACFRE designation holders in the profession. ACFRE is an advanced certified fundraising executive title. So she's very, very knowledgeable about this topic. And that's why I'm so excited to have her share all of her knowledge with us today. Her books include Major Gift Fundraising for Small Shops, Raising More with Less, as well as 50 Asks in 50 Weeks. So you'll want to check out those books if you have a chance just to read up on all of this information here. I work for CauseVox. I'm an account executive here, and so I work with lots of nonprofits getting their fundraising up and running. So if in the course of this webinar you realize you need to get your capital campaign up and running, we have a lot of tools to help you do that. We do provide best-in-class online fundraising for all of your donation forms, including those mobile payments, capital campaigns, ticketing, peer-to-peer. You can basically run all of your fundraising in one place. We do provide hands-on, one-on-one support and onboarding with real people like myself. So no robots, don't worry. And then we do also provide top-rated fundraising education in the forms of guides, templates, webinars, and courses like today's webinar. So again, you can raise more in less time by replacing your clunky, outdated, or complex software and PayPal buttons, for example, and replace it with more streamlined two-step donation process with a complete marketing-focused donation form that includes one-time, recurring, and pledge gifts. You can run Apple Pay, Google Pay, PayPal, ACH bank transfer, one-time and recurring donations, pledges. All the donations have auto receipts and customized branding available. You can also sell more tickets for your event in connection with your donations, and run peer-to-peer fundraising all at the same time. So again, it's a place to house all of your fundraising under one roof. For capital campaigns, of course, the pledge option of the donation form is really, really beneficial because you can accept really large gifts over time, between 3 and 60 months or 2 to 5 years on the CauseVox form specifically. If you're interested in learning more about having a really streamlined, easy donation for donors, you can schedule a demo with us on our Schedule a Demo page, and we can chat more one-on-one about your organization's needs. Or if you have any other questions or you want to get our free fundraising resources, you can sign up for our blog, and we send out free resources every week. So it's a really nice subscription. right now, I'm going to stop sharing and hand the mic over to Amy. So she's going to handle the rest of our webinar today, and then I'll jump back in the Q&A in about 40 minutes or so whenever she's done. Again, I'll be handling the chat at the end, so feel free to chat in your questions. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, let us go ahead and get started. I'm Amy Eisenstein. Thank you so much, Jenna, for that introduction. We're going to be talking about how to plan an efficient and effective campaign using new tools and technology. But first, I want to invite anybody who hasn't already done so to chat in. Let us know who you are, where you're calling in from, what organization you're with. We've already got an international crowd here. We've got Randy from Canada and Surav from India. So wonderful to see you. Great. Thank you. Morgana from Colorado and Molly from Michigan. So keep chatting in who you are so that we can see who you are and where you're calling in from. We're going to use the chat box today. That's why I need you to get your fingers going and open up that chat box. So the first question, and we're not going to do it in the poll function, we're going to do it right in the webinar chat, is where are you in your campaign? So you just have to stick in the number 1 for just thinking about it, 2 for feasibility study, phase or stage, 3 for soliciting leadership level gifts, and 4 for the public phase. So number 3 is the quiet phase, right? So good. All right, let's see. All right, so we've got some folks soliciting leadership level gifts. Oh, Jenna, you really attract an international crowd. We've got somebody from South Africa. All right, so we've got folks sort of all over the spectrum here, just getting started, thinking about it, and lots of folks already soliciting gifts. So what we're going to cover today is new tools and technology. Section 1, we're going to talk about sort of making your campaign effective and efficient and how to work effectively and efficiently using technology. Then we're going to talk about the steps of a campaign and how to prepare for a campaign. And then we're going to go back to new tools and tech specifically for campaigns and fundraising. So that's what it's going to look like today. So why are we even talking about technology? As you just heard from Jenna, and CauseVox, they're trying to do everything they can to make donations as effective and efficient. And that's what technology is for, to save time, to save money, to be more effective and more efficient. And so a campaign is really challenging because it's a whole lot more fundraising than you've ever done before. And so it's even more critical than normal to save time, save money, save resources, and make your work life and your fundraising as efficient and as effective as possible. So we're going to start with some of the most obvious. Right now, we're on Zoom, right? You're watching me from all around the country, all around the world, and we're on Zoom. I'm in New Jersey. And the reality is it doesn't matter because it's almost like you're sitting right in my office with me. And we can do this from literally anywhere in the world. And so one of the things that we learned during the pandemic was that we could fundraise with technology and video chat. So it's not just Zoom, of course, but any video chat, whether it's FaceTime or, there's a million different kinds. But I want you to really think about what opportunities has using Zoom opened up for you. Because, 4 years ago, most people would have said, don't solicit major gifts or campaign gifts virtually over video chat. Well, if you can be in the room with someone, great, that's wonderful. But if you can't, don't wait for 6 months or a year until you're in the same city with them. at least start the conversation, but you may be asking for gifts over Zoom. So it's important to learn how to be comfortable with it, how to look professional, how to have your sound and light be good, all of the things that we've come to learn over the past few years in the pandemic. Interestingly, sort of side fact, I started the business that I run now, Capital Campaign Pro, with all remote and virtual campaign consulting. My guess is that we were the first and only campaign consultants in the world to consult that way and to advise our clients that way. It wasn't because of the pandemic. It was because we were leveraging technology to be in boardrooms, across the world, across the country and across the world. And so don't just assume that now that the pandemic is faded, that you have to be back in the room with your donors. That might mean waiting 6 months or a year or taking an expensive flight to see them. You can Zoom in with them, right? All right, let's talk about some of my favorite sort of time-saving, efficiency, planning tools. And I would love to hear in the chat what you're using. So let's just talk really briefly about some of them. So Trello, what is a capital campaign? It's a big, complicated, or simple, depending, program or project, right? So Trello is a project organizational tool. So I'm curious what other project organizational tools people are using. If you want to put it in the chat, I would love to see and help your colleagues out. But it keeps your projects organized, right? Thank you. I never know whether it's Asana or Asana. I'm going to say Asana. ClickUp and Miro. Those are two I haven't heard of. I'm going to have to look into that. Yes, but whatever you use, right? This is not time for pen and paper. We have tools and technology to keep the steps and the projects organized and moving along. Okay, so let's talk about Dropbox for a minute. Dropbox, of course, is a document sharing technology. You can use Google Drive. I have it on here because I want to tell you a little story that not every technology works for everybody or every organization. We started with Google Drive, and it wasn't working for some of our team members. And so we switched to Dropbox, and that happens to work better for us. There are different functionalities with different technology. So you want to play around and be willing to experiment. I mean, you don't want to switch every week, but try something for 6 months, see if your team likes it and uses it and adopts it. If not, try something else. It should make people's lives easier and more effective and more efficient. My favorite on this list, honestly, is Calendly. Anybody using a scheduling app, either Calendly or something else? I have to admit, when the idea of using Calendly or a scheduling app first came up a couple of years ago, there were people on my team who were really resistant. They thought, part of donor engagement or engagement with our clients was about going back and forth and sending emails. And some people saw it as additional touches, outreach and communication and connection. And so they didn't want to give that up. They didn't want to automate it, which is what Calendly does. But we eventually decided to give it a try. And I have to tell you that I think Calendly saves me over 100 hours a year. Let me just say that again, 100 hours a year, 2 hours a week in going back and forth. Are you available this time? Are you available at that time? Now, there are certain donors to your campaign or people in your community that you might not opt to use Calendly with, right? They are so busy or so whatever their role is that you either just say, tell me when you're available next week. I'll meet with you anytime, and you move your whole calendar around. Or for whatever reason, you find that for a handful of select people, you don't want to use your technology and app, fine. You still have that option. But for the vast majority of your scheduling needs, something like Calendly, where it allows people to pick a time on your calendar, it's amazing. And I think that as nonprofits, sometimes we're afraid to try new things. Teams are hesitant. Maybe our computer systems aren't up to date. And so we're a little behind the times, but heading into a campaign, you have to sort of get rid of some of that and be willing to try the new tools. Ask around, what are your colleagues using? Okay, Slack, right? It's a communication tool for teams, internal. I have to admit, some of my team members pushed me to use Slack, and I didn't really get it at first. I didn't understand what it was for. I thought, email's just as good. And it took me 4 or 6 months to really start to lean into it and use it. I was aware that my team was using it more than me, but I was just still sending emails. But eventually, I also figured out the benefits of it. And so sometimes it does take time to adopt new technology. A doodle poll, of course, if you're scheduling a committee meeting, obviously, and Chat GPT, right? This is the newest technology for writing out there. And I encourage you to experiment with it. Now, listen, I do not suggest that you write your appeal letters using Chat GPT and then don't heavily edit them, or thank you letters, right? But it's a great starting point. And I encourage you to play with it and say, we'd like to thank our donor for this or that. And this, the more details you can add into Chat GPT, the more specific the output is. Who's tried it? Let me know in the chat. Have you tried Chat GPT? What have you used it for? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Let us know. I think it's worth playing with for sure. It has already saved me many hours. Not that I don't heavily edit the documents it spits out. I do, but it is significantly improved from starting from scratch. Okay. Amara, thank you. You've played with it. All right, let's take a few minutes. So that's some organizational, time-saving, efficiency, general work technology that you should be integrating. I would encourage you, if you're going into a campaign, to try 1 or 2 time-saving, efficiency, effectiveness, planning tools. Those are the ones we just talked about. Like I said, at the end of the session, we are going to talk about fundraising specific technology. But now let's talk about how are you going to plan your campaign. So here's a campaign timeline, right? Let's, as you're thinking about planning your timeline or your campaign, there's lots of things to do. So step 1 or phase 1 is pre-campaign planning, and several of you are here. So you can see that this could take anywhere from 3 to 12 months, depending on what you have in place already. And here in pre-campaign planning, you're going to put together a project plan. You're going to outline your campaign objectives. What are you raising money for? You are going to establish a working goal. So how much do the campaign objectives and the project plan cost? You're going to be your initial working goal. You're going to draft a case for support, right? Why should people give? Why should they care? Now, this says draft, and I mean it. This is not a fancy brochure. This is just a Word document that, has draft stamped on it. A gift range chart, figuring out how many gifts you need at what levels you need to have a successful campaign to get to your goal, and a depth chart. That's who might give each gift. So you want to have 2 or 3 potential donors, realistic potential donors for each gift that you need in your gift range chart. And these are the things that you're going to put together in pre-campaign planning. All right. So next you are going to do a feasibility study, and that is when you test your plan with your lead supporters and donors. You're going to discuss that draft case for support and plan you made in pre-campaign planning, and you are going to assess the giving potential of your community to see if your working goal is on target, if you can raise anywhere near that much, or maybe you find that you can raise way more than you thought. This is the opportunity to do that in the feasibility study. And I have to say that I'm going to talk, of course, more about technology, but here it's going to be a combination of technology tools that we already talked about, planning tools, effective and efficiency in terms of scheduling and planning and staying organized. And sometimes it's good old-fashioned conversation, and there's no getting around that. So sometimes there's places where you're not going to use technology. So after your feasibility study, you have a quick couple months to finalize your campaign planning. You're going to adjust your plans based on what you heard in the feasibility study. You have an opportunity right here to revise your working goal. So if you heard in the feasibility study that everybody's excited and everybody wants to give and support you in a big way, you might raise your goal here before you launch into the quiet phase. On the other hand, if you found, oh my gosh, people weren't quite as excited as we hoped, we're not sure we have the gifts that we thought we were going to have, we may need to scale back the project and the scope and revise the working goal at this point. You're going to finalize the case for support by integrating comments and feedback that you heard in the feasibility study, and you're going to develop your final campaign plans. Okay. Now you're ready for the quiet phase. It's finally time to start fundraising. Look at that. You've done phase 1, 2, and 3, and you have not raised $1 yet. But now it's time. So in the quiet phase, you are going to solicit 3 groups of people. Your leadership level gifts, your board members, and your campaign volunteers. And those 3 groups of people should get you to approximately 75% of your goal. When you've solicited those folks and gotten to 75 or sometimes more % of your goal, it's time to kick off and go public with your campaign. But just notice in the quiet phase, go back one phase, that's 6 to 24 months. So it's usually, somewhere in the middle of that, honestly, 12 to 18 months that you're in the quiet phase. It's the longest part of your campaign. You're soliciting the bulk of the money. So that is not quick or simple there. All right. Phase 5 is the kickoff. So once you've gotten to at least 75% of your goal, you are going to publicly announce your goal. Now, finally, you're going to settle on a goal. Your goal has not been public yet. You've not announced it. You've not put it on a brochure up until this point. It's been quiet, your goal. And based on what you raised in the quiet phase, you have an opportunity here again to adjust your goal, to increase it or decrease it based on what actually happened in the quiet phase. So if you got all the big gifts you asked for, you may get to your goal in the quiet phase. So it's an opportunity to raise your goal. If some of those big gifts didn't come in that you were really hoping for, you may need to scale back your project and scale back your goal. And so here's another opportunity to do that when you announce an official goal. Now's the time for a press release and a kickoff celebration. Okay, public phase. It's time to solicit the base. This is when you do your broad-based fundraising. You send out your emails, your direct mail. You might do a phone-a-thon. You might do crowdfunding, all those kind of things. You solicit the community and your base for support. You re-solicit the uncommitted, anybody who asked in the quiet phase that wasn't ready to make a gift, and you close the gap to your goal. I just want you to notice that we have 2 months plus. This is quick. This is short. This is not dragged out over a year or two. When you determine how much you're going to raise in your public phase, you should know that you should be able to do it in a couple of months. It's a lot of energy. It's high energy. It's intense. It's in your face, and then it should be over. And phase 7 is stewardship, right? You've raised your money. You've surpassed your goal. It's time to celebrate, express gratitude, send pledge reminders, and do stewardship sort of into the future and into your next campaign. Okay, so another quick poll. Let's see in the chat. What's your working goal? 1 is under $1 million. 2 is $1 million to under 5 million. 3 is 5 million to 10 million. And 4 is over 10 million. How much are you raising in your campaign? Yes. Okay. 1, 2, 4. Excellent. Several 1s, some 2s, 1, 4. Excellent. All right. Okay. So listen, I want to remind you, we're going to keep going. We're going to talk about some more technology. But feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box. We're going to have lots of time for questions. So Kevin's asked, what advice do you have for an organization that has to launch but doesn't have 75% committed yet? The organization is going to purchase a building because they have to move. There's a difference between, so depends on what you mean by launch. So do you mean launch the quiet phase, or do you mean launch the public phase? Now you say the public phase. Okay. So I don't know why you have to go public. You can buy the building before you go public. You can be public about your campaign and your project without announcing a goal, without being specific. So your campaign is likely to have lots of components that are not just the building itself. And so when you come up with a campaign goal, it's important to make sure that you're paying for programs and services for the first 3 years. There's probably an endowment component. There's moving costs. There's construction costs. There's fundraising costs. There's all sorts of things in a campaign goal. So there should be enough built in that there's some flexibility that, if you don't think you're going to get to your campaign goal that you initially set for your quiet phase, that it is time to scale back the project. Maybe you won't be able to put everything in the building that you hoped, or not right away. Maybe you phase it. And you should be announcing a goal that you can reach so that you can celebrate and be successful at the end of the campaign. But if you, let's see, but you don't have to launch just because launch the public phase just because you're buying a building. You can say we're fundraising towards the building and we're going to start construction and we're going to continue to raise money, and we're not going public with the goal, and we're not going public by asking the public for money yet. We will, but right now we're in the quiet phase, raising the money for the building even as we do construction. That's part of it. Okay. Laura says, how do grants fit in here? Are grants to be applied to the capital project? Yeah, absolutely. Lots of times we apply grants and foundation funding to a capital project, for sure. It's a piece of the philanthropic puzzle, for sure. All right. So let's keep going. All right. So let's talk about identifying donors. It's a really critical piece of any good campaign. So we want to make sure that we're using low and high tech to identify and build relationships with donors. So the first thing you'll see, low tech, no tech, conversations and interviews. The number one way to learn about your donors and to meet new people And to get recommendations of people to talk to is through interviews and conversations. So the reason that I point this out is because there is a place for technology in fundraising, and there is a place for not technology in fundraising. And you have to be talking to your donors. There's no technology that's going to get you around that. There's nothing you can learn, honestly. I don't know if I want to say there's nothing you can learn, but you can learn so much more about an individual than you'll ever learn with research or wealth screening. So everybody's focused on the research, the wealth screening, finding things about their donors. But if you sit down and ask thoughtful questions, you are going to learn so much more. So of course you need technology to know the history of that donor's giving to your organization. You're going to do research to find out what you can about where they've given, what kind of gifts they've made, wealth screening to see what kind of assets they have. But truthfully, there is nothing that can replace sitting down with your donor and talking to them, because you can have the richest person in the world who is completely and totally unphilanthropic. And so you can get excited like, oh my gosh, this person has millions and billions of dollars. But if they have no interest in your organization or no interest in being generous, it doesn't matter. All right, so let's talk about some more tools and technology that you're going to use specifically with your capital campaign, with fundraising. So number one is your donor CRM. So I am curious what everybody here is using. What are you using as your donor CRM, your donor database? What are you using to track donations? Okay, Kevin's using Bloomerang. Sarah's using MonkeyPod, which I have not heard of, so I'll have to look that up. Gwen's using Bloomerang too. Great. Kindful, Donor Perfect. Excellent. All right, good. So you just want to make sure that you have a donor database that can track and manage your donors. Wealth screening. Who's doing wealth screening? What are you using? Have you used it? Has it worked? Not worked? Share, I guess, if you like what you've used. I want to say that you should take wealth screening with a grain of salt. It is a great starting place. It is not the end all be all, but it can help you identify people you didn't even know you should be talking to. So, all right, let's talk about some basics like an iPad for sharing your case for support and your plans, right? Whether we're sitting down with a donor over Zoom or we're sitting next to them on their couch, flip open your iPad, share that, the blueprint, right? You don't have to necessarily have it in paper anymore. Think about when there's an advantage of having if you're sitting in front of someone or even over here, you probably don't want to send them a video, but you can send them a video before or after your conversation, right? Stewardship videos. Anybody using, who's using stewardship video technology? Let's think of what they're called. Grativid, ThankView, others, there's tons of companies that do, there's so many, I don't know why I'm going blank right now, but what are you using to thank your donors? How are you handling that and managing that? Tours, right? Virtual, live, pre-recorded. You can use your iPhone for some of these videos. You have this technology already in your pocket. You don't need to invest tons and tons in technology. It can be low production value, but high, on personal touch. So are you giving tours right now? What about somebody who's, 1,000 or 10,000 miles away? How are you going to give them a tour? It can be actually live where you're both on at the same time, walking through the construction site or the building or showing the programs and services, or it can be pre-recorded and you can let them watch it at their leisure. So, there are really so many opportunities, I think, to really, to help to boost your campaign with technology. All right. I just want to remind you one more time that I'm happy to answer questions. So if you have questions, go ahead and stick them in the Q&A box now. All right. So I want to ask you to really think about this. We're talking about technology. You know, traditionally, campaign consultants were in the room with people. They were sitting at the conference room table with their clients, in the committee meetings. Everybody had to be around the room, right? Donors too. And I want to challenge that assumption and going back to that as the default post-pandemic. I think I mentioned that at Capital Campaign Pro, we set up this company to be totally virtual and remote. We never sat. I mean, listen, we've all sat at the conference room table of our clients before Capital Campaign Pro, but it's not to do with the pandemic. It's because I can Zoom into a client, literally. I mean, right now, Zoom in and have a meeting, and it can be effective, efficient, affordable, and I can consult just as well from here. And nobody needs to get on the phone, the plane. Nobody needs to drive. So I really want you to think about, when do you need people in the room? When is it beneficial? And when should you be using technology to have more effective, efficient meetings? Now, committee members, it's wonderful to be in person, but you can treat it as a special opportunity or a special occasion when you're bringing people together to celebrate a milestone or have some sort of, break bread literally with people. But for regular committee meetings, if they're run well, let me say this, you can do them just as effectively and probably more efficiently on Zoom. Nobody needs to park. Nobody needs childcare. You can bookend it right back to back with other meetings. Committee members can do it from anywhere in the world. Let me say this. Committee meetings can be deadly in person or on Zoom. So it's critical that you run a good meeting, whether you're in person or on Zoom or, whatever technology. I'm using Zoom as a generic for any video chat. But it's so important because, I've seen meetings in person where the person doing the talking stands up and everybody's bored to death and they're just doing the reporting out, and it's a terribly run meeting, and that can happen in person and it can happen on Zoom. So if you are going to have a meeting on Zoom or in person, call on everybody, let everybody talk, have a discussion, ask people's opinion, get people moving, all sorts of things. So really, just don't default to in person because that's the way it used to be. And now you think the pandemic's over. Do it because it is meaningful to get together in person, and do it virtually when it's effective and efficient. And honestly, the same things with donors. Ask yourself these questions. Be thoughtful about it. All right. Randy's asking, do you need a consultant who has done a capital campaign in the same country you are getting government funding for your project? So I would say that if you're looking for expertise in government funding in your country, then yes, you need a consultant who has experience with that. We consult for organizations all over the world with fundraising strategy, but not on strategy of how to get government funding in other countries, because that's not our area of expertise. So you definitely need somebody who has that specific expertise to your country and your community, if that's what you're looking for. Okay, great question though. Thank you. What else is keeping you up at night? What other questions do you have about your campaigns? Anything that you want to be thinking about or that is worrying you? I guess, what I want to say is what's really important is that you both be brave enough to pick next technology and try new technology. Ask around, ask in your community. What apps are people using? What services are people using that are helping them be effective and efficient? Ask in your Facebook groups, ask on LinkedIn, ask on your social media sites, ask your volunteers, right? What are they using? And pick one or two new things to try each year so that your fundraising is getting better and better and that your campaign is more effective and efficient. All right. So Amara's asking, what advice do I have for creating successful campaigns with limited staff availability? So I have to tell you that, every nonprofit is strapped for staff and resources, right? That's sort of the nature of the beast in our field. However, a campaign is actually an opportunity to staff up. A capital campaign, by definition, is a multi-year effort to build the capacity of your organization. And so while you're building the capacity of your programs and services, you're simultaneously building the internal capacity of staffing and fundraising. Capital campaigns are the most efficient and effective and cost-effective kind of fundraising we do. On average, capital campaigns cost 10% of whatever you raise. So 10 cents to raise $1. You all know that things like direct mail and events, event fundraising, even grant writing costs more than that to raise $1. So where does your campaign budget come from? It comes from your campaign budget, what you're raising for your campaign, not from your operating budget. So build into your capital campaign budget 10% to help you raise the money. And in there is additional staff. So the idea that you would do a capital campaign and try and raise 2 times, 5 times, or 10 times more than you normally raise annually, or 20 times or 50 times more than you raise annually with no additional staff or resources is not smart. It doesn't work. That's like a surefire way to burn out your staff. So make the case that if you're going to raise $1 million, $5 million, $10 million, $25 million, that you need to set aside or raise 10% more than that in order to hire both internal staffing and external consulting expertise. All right, that is it for today. I'm happy to stick around and answer questions, but I do encourage you to get my free step-by-step guide to capital campaigns, our checklist and timeline that I shared. So you can visit capitalcampaignpro.com to pick that up or text checklist to the number on your screen.
Wow, thank you so much, Amy. That was wonderful. I am actually so grateful to learn all the information you shared, especially even the definition of what a capital campaign is, starting with the basics there. So thank you again. And to everybody still in our webinar here, I would really encourage you to think about some questions. We have Amy here with us. She is one of the most educated and just advanced consultants for capital campaigns, and you have her here for free. So please take advantage. Like we just talked about tons and tons of opportunities and how, you're probably going to need to hire a consultant. We have her here. So take a minute and think of any other additional questions you might have. Great.
I see one for Kevin. Also, though, you can certainly email me later if you have questions, if you think of something later. So Kevin's asking any advice for all volunteer organization launching a campaign beyond following the advice that you've already mapped out. So Kevin, I think that a capital campaign is an opportunity to grow your organization, and it's time to hire your first staff member. So built into the goal of your campaign should be to professionalize your operations. And that means hiring an executive director and maybe even an administrative person. So if you're growing your programs and services, honestly, it's time to start adding staff. That is a sign of a growing organization. Truthfully, the organizations that stay all volunteer, they stay small. And that's not necessarily at face value a bad thing. But if you want donors to dig deep and give you lots of funding, you're going to have to show them that you're running a real operation. And that comes with professionalizing, and that the first step often is hiring staff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Danny's asking, what do you recommend a capital campaign when you have 3 weeks to raise $6 million? I don't. I think it's totally unrealistic, unless you have one superhero that's going to give you that. But that's not what a capital campaign is. So I don't know what's going on at your organization, Danny, but it sounds bad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about for the organizations that are on like step one, like they're just thinking about planning? What do you recommend like their first step is?
Yeah. So hopefully your organization has gone through a strategic planning process, and your board members have created and developed a plan and bought into a plan that you are going to take your organization to the next level. And then that's when it's time to do a capital campaign, when all the leaders at your organization are committed to real growth at your organization. And then you need to put together a subcommittee to figure out, what does that look like, right? Are we buying a building? Are we renovating a building? Are we starting new programs? Are we expanding our programs? Like what does that mean to grow at our organization? What does it mean to take a huge leap? That's what a campaign is, a capital campaign is. Otherwise, if you're just growing incrementally 5% a year, that's part of your annual fund. You're not doing any big growth. A capital campaign is for when you want to have explosive growth and jump to the next level. And so you really want to do a lot of careful planning about what that looks like, what your needs are, how much it will cost. And then once you're at that point of knowing what your needs are and approximately how much it will cost, it's probably time at that point to call in an expert. And I recommend interviewing 3 campaign consultants before you pick. One, a really big firm, one, a solopreneur, an individual campaign advisor, and then us as your third option. And just compare, see what your needs are, see what they're offering, and then you'll find the expertise you need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What are some qualities? Oh, sorry, Jason. I was just curious, like, what are the qualities of a consultant that people should be looking for?
Yeah. So you should be looking first and foremost for experience, right? Do they have the experience in running multiple campaigns in either the community, not in the geography that you are, but like if you're an animal shelter, have they ever run animal shelter campaigns before? If, sort of the type and scope and scale of the campaign, if you're going to do a $10 million campaign and they've only done $1 million campaigns, you have to ask yourself. So you're looking for sort of like-minded, they have to have experience in things that you're doing or thinking about, anyways. And they have to be personable because they're going to be talking to your board members. They have to be responsive. So do they get back to you in a timely way? Do they come recommended? Do people who have worked with them before like them? Have they been successful? What does that look like? Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess, and Jason has one question if you have a moment just to stay on here a little bit. Jason says, you mentioned building in 3 years of operating expenses into your capital campaign. Can you expand on communicating about sustainability once the building is built?
Yeah. So you want to have a maintenance fund as part of your campaign, and also building your fundraising capacity with an eye towards increasing your annual fund, because your expenses will go up once you expand your programs and services. So a campaign is about expanding all your fundraising. After a campaign happens, your fundraising should be increased from prior to the campaign. All your donor base should have expanded. Your donors should be giving more. Your systems and infrastructure for fundraising should be enhanced. You should have more staff. You should have better systems. So the expectation is that you will raise more. And you have hopefully raised maintenance funds as well.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I think Amara has one more question if you want to answer that. How much
Sure.
time percent-wise would you say our focus should be on past donors versus new donors? That's a good question.
Yeah. I mean, the majority of your time should be spent on current donors. They're your most likely donors. They're already in your inner circle, and they've already raised their hand to say they believe in your mission and your cause. And so the focus should be on your current donors. And then, you should always be trying to find new donors, but that's not the majority of the time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good to know. This is such valuable information. Thank you again, Amy. I don't know if anybody has last minute questions. I know we can wrap up here soon. I just want to drop in. Oh, yes, Drew. Recording and slides will be available after the webinar. I should probably be able to send that out by tomorrow or Monday at the latest. You can email Amy directly. I think I copied that down okay. And otherwise, if you have any additional questions that we didn't answer, of course, you can reach out to Amy or CauseVox. I'll drop in our support email here. And then if you would like to check out a demo of CauseVox, maybe you need a really efficient and streamlined way to accept all of these donations that you have coming in. We can accept automated and offline gifts to be added to your campaign. So check out a demo with us. You can speak one-on-one with me. And then again, those free resources, you can subscribe to our blog. But again, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Amy. This has been wonderful and loved everything you shared. So yeah, thank you again. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their afternoon or evening, wherever you are.
Thank you, Jenna. Take care.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.